Welcome to our graduate training series. This is something that this is one of the ones that we repeat every year, but I try and make it a little bit different. Today we're calling it PowerPoint Trade Secrets. A little bit of tradecraft on things that I do to be able to make slides faster, more efficiently, and also that look better at the same time. I wanted to just give you just a little bit more info on why I'm okay to be standing up here. Who am I? There's two things that you should know about me. The first one is, it is not my job to give presentations. I don't do this a lot. This is not normal for me. And so what that does is it gives me a certain amount of empathy for all of you who are thinking about putting together your own research presentations. I get it. There's a lot that goes into it. It can be challenging. It can be a little bit scary. And the more preparation that you put into it, the better you're going to do overall when it actually comes time to stand up here with a dry mouth and shaking hands and whatever else that you have. But what I do is I do spend a lot of time helping other people give presentations. So this is my laptop right here, and I've got about the past year and a half of my work on here, and I just did a quick search this morning. I've got about 1,300 PowerPoints on here that I've worked on or I've looked at that are versioned. I do this a lot. Malcolm Gladwell talked about 10,000 hours to become an expert at something, and I feel like I'm rounding the corner just about getting there for that. People that I help, I really focus on academic presentations for a layperson audience. So I've helped all of our TEDx speakers over the past 5 years that we've had stand up on that stage. We have an annual student speaking series called Ignite, which are 5-minute talks with auto-advancing slides. Our team works with the entire cohort that we have that are involved with that. But I also spend a lot of time working with any student that wants help, especially if they're involved with our Research Week Student Research Symposium, which Scott talked about, that will be coming up in April. And through all of this, I have looked at thousands and thousands of slide decks and thousands and thousands, well, hundreds of academic posters. I do this a lot. I also go out and I spend a fair amount of my free time, a good amount, more than I'd like to admit, of my free time looking around and seeing what other people do. What are other best practices? What are things that will make slides better, more efficient, that will be able to help you tell your story better? So that's me. I want to get just a sense of who we have in the room and kind of what your comfortability is with PowerPoint or with making presentations. So I've got these binary things, so you should expect to raise your hand once with each of these and raise your hand high. Who considers themselves a newbie to designing slides in PowerPoint or academic posters in PowerPoint? Raise your hand high. So that means everyone here thinks that they are a veteran and they're waiting for me to challenge them with new tips and tricks. Raise your hand high if you're a veteran. Okay, we'll see if I can do anything with that. Okay, now if you are sitting down and you're getting ready for an academic conference, are you more likely to be working on a poster or an oral presentation? So raise your hand if you're more likely to be working on a poster. Raise it high. Okay, what about an oral presentation? So about half and half. Okay, now as you're getting ready and you're doing the work on this, who is sitting down to a PC computer? PC. Lots of PC. Okay, how about Macs? A fair amount of those too. We're still about half and half. Okay, finally, and probably most important, who uses PowerPoint as their primary program of choice for creating posters and slides? That is good. Who is a Keynote, Google Slides, Prezi, and Design user? We've got a few in here. I like Keynote, but because of all of you who stay on PowerPoint, that is what we stay on. So most of what I'm talking about today is going to be based in PowerPoint, but lots of the principles will work PC or Mac, Prezi, or, well, Keynote or PowerPoint. And so some of the buttons will be different, but this is going to focus on, I'm running this off of PowerPoint 2016 on a Mac. So today, in the past, when I've given workshops, I've talked a lot about the principles of good slide design. And after I've done that, the most common feedback that I've received is, okay, I get that. I need to create simpler slides less information on the page, allow me to be the star and do most of the talking. And then there's a follow-up of, I wish you could have spent a little bit more time talking about how. So that's what today is going to focus on. How do you, once you have taken off all of the extraneous parts of your slides and posters, what do you replace it with? And so that's what we're going to look at. How do you make slides quickly? How do you make slides efficiently? How to make them look great? And how to make slides that best tell your story. So these are my trade secrets. These are things that I do. It's not all encompassing. I've chosen my top dozen, and we're going to kind of go quick fire through these fast. If you have questions, please stop me, let me know. I can run back and go through this. Also, at the end of this, I will just hang around. So if you have a specific question, I'd be happy to answer it, or if you want me to repeat something, all of these are going to be auto screen captures, so I don't have to be fiddling up here, but I can walk through it slowly afterwards if you want to say, okay, what was that button? How did that work? I'm interested in learning how to do that. So these trade secrets I've put into 4 kind of fun categories. So we're going to talk about gathering intelligence, dodging bullets, decoding data, and finally killing it during your presentation. So first, I'm just going to jump right into it. Gathering intelligence is the idea of getting started and setting yourself up for success before you even start constructing or building your slides. Things that you can do to get the information you need and set up your workspace so it makes sense for you. The first trade secret that I wanted to talk about is don't rely on slide layouts, which is the one thing that PowerPoint really, really pushes you towards. The first slide that you see when you jump into PowerPoint, it's going to look like this. And it's going to say, you should have a title here and a subtitle here. And then a title, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. The very, very best thing that you can do is to get rid of that. Most of the slides for the examples that I'm going to be working on, they came from a presentation I did last year for our university president to the Utah Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee, the people that give us a whole lot of our money. And so I work really hard to make sure that it's not just a concise presentation, but also that it captures legislators' interest. And so if this was the first slide, the title slide that we used for this presentation, it wouldn't capture a lot of interest. Even changing the fonts, adjusting the sizes, making it a little bit more optimal is not doing a lot. The best thing that you can do to get started is to go up to your slide layout and just select blank. Take off all of the suggested boxes and start from scratch. And that's going to give you a lot more chance to use a little bit of creativity to put things in a way that makes sense for your content, not what Microsoft thinks your content needs to be. So here's an example of what I did with this slide. I really tried to put a combination of shapes and pictures and words together to create one type of landscape that shows visually and with words what we're trying to communicate, so that you're not only creating an intellectual connection, but a visually pleasing emotional connection that will provide cues on what you're going to be talking about. So all I've done is I've moved the text over to the side, I've created a box, and we'll go through a little bit more of what these adjustments are, but just the idea that if you just move your text, change the font, add a picture, and a box, all of a sudden it will look so much better. I added a couple different things, and I think that this slide worked a little bit better than the first slide that we started out with. I hope that that's the case. So we'll get into more of how that happened, but you can kind of see it didn't take too long and there weren't too many steps involved. Font box, couple photos, another shape on top of that. We changed the points on it, and we'll walk through that a little bit closer as we learn some of our other skills. Something else before we jump onto slide making is, as you get further and further in your academic career and in your research lines, it's going to be less and less common that you're going to be starting a presentation from scratch. Almost all the time you'll be kifing slides from previous presentations, other poster presentations, maybe colleagues' presentations, and it gets really easy to just want to drag and drop into a new presentation, but you're also dragging all of your old past design mistakes and things that you haven't learned yet into your new PowerPoint presentation. One thing that's a real challenge is here's some slides that I had, and if I wanted to change the way this presentation looked and pull one image into a new presentation, as you can see, I pasted in here. When you paste it, it retains your groupings, it retains your crop, it retains any type of liner fills that you apply to your presentation. And so you have to manually undo all of those things, which can be time consuming and which would make you say, I'll just leave it the way it was. What you can do is there's a really quick fix. If you create a copy of your PowerPoint presentation and change the extension of it from a PPTX to a zip, it actually makes a zip file with folders that save all the uncropped clean versions of your images. So if you go to the PowerPoint and media folder, you'll see all of the images already saved, ready to go for you to import in any new PowerPoint presentation. So that's something that can save you a lot of time. And being able to pull it in instead of having it have all of the crops, it's right there and it's ready to go. Now this doesn't just apply to images, but that works for all of your embedded data as well. So if you go to the folder where you had your zip file and you go into, so here's one graph that we had in there and I want the data out of it. If you go to the PowerPoint folder and then the embeddings, all of your spreadsheets that were linked will be located in there. And you can pull them out and use them for whatever else that you need them for. So something you may not have known already. Are there veterans that I've told something new to already, I hope? Okay, good. We're on a good track. Let's move to our third trade secret. I think that something that can be really useful that can help you feel like you're creating a PowerPoint that's you and that's your own and that is unique from something else is to create a custom color palette. So most of you know where to select colors from. Anytime that you have text or a box or a line around a box, those are all places where you can select the color. And normally you will have a single color palette. You can select one of the pre-made themes, but most of them are not as aesthetically pleasing as you might like. One thing that's nice is you can create a custom color palette from any image that you drop into PowerPoint if you want them to coordinate. So to do that, the key is to use this eyedropper right here, and you just click it on any color that you have anywhere on your slide, and it will create not only that color, but a variation of shades and hues that come off of that. If you name it and save it, then it will not just be used for that power presentation, but for every PowerPoint that you open after that, you can apply that specific color scheme, even to already made presentations, to any presentation that you want. And you don't have to remake it every time you create a new presentation. So it's fairly simple. It takes a little bit of time to get started, but once you have it, it's that much faster to choose the exact color that you want because it's already preloaded in your font colors, in your shape colors, and in your line colors. So that's something that that takes a little bit of time from the get-go, but you can, but it will save you time in the long run. Okay, that is our first group so far. Are there any questions up to this point? Yes?
You said that the palette will stick around for your new presentations.
Uh-huh.
To open up that last presentation to get those colors, or it will open up?
It's a system file, so it stays there. So anytime you open, you'll have as many new custom color palettes as you've created, and they will automatically load. So, anything else? Okay, so the second group is dodging bullets. Not literal bullets, but I think if there's one thing that I say over and over is that if you have a bulleted list, chances are there's something that you can do to make it better. One thing that I don't like about bulleted lists is not only does it create a block of text, not only do PowerPoint defaults have not a lot of difference between your first level, second level, and third level links, so it looks like just one load of text. Also, when you're using the slide space, it almost always is not the most efficient way to use the real estate that you have on the slide. So what's one way to do it? Most of you probably are familiar with SmartArt. Is there anyone here that hasn't used SmartArt before? Okay, just for a few of you. So what you can do, this is a fairly normal standard slide that we'd use for higher ed presentation, talking about the 3 different levels of education that we provide at Utah State. It is 3 bullet points, 3 sub-bullet points each, and what you can see is it all, instead of looking like different ideas, this looks like one single block of text. And then you have one single block of nothing right over here. So what we can do is, it's actually very simple from your bulleted list to take Smart Art, and you can just click on your home screen and convert to Smart Art, and you can choose one of any of the Smart Arts, and it will turn it into, instead of a bulleted list, 3 distinct boxes, so you can see that you have 3 distinct ideas. The thing that I like about this is everything that's in Smart Art, you can use the PowerPoint standards to change the colors and the style of it, but I like that you can change each individual box just like it were a text box or like it were a shape. So you can manually change the colors, you can manually change the fonts, and you can also change the shapes of what they have chosen in there. So I might decide instead of boxes, I'd like arrows. And so all you have to do is convert the box to an arrow. One other hack that I do is I like to use Smart Art for layout, but not necessarily for the boxes. So what you can do is you can set a box line to none and a box fill to none, and then it just looks like it is 3 text boxes sitting on the page. And the focus really goes to those 3 main ideas that you have up top with these as supporting pieces down below. And all of a sudden, compared to where we started with a single bulleted list, not only does it look better, not only does it make a better use of the slide, but it's also easier to tease out the main ideas from what we have here. So it's easier to communicate. So I added a couple extra bells and whistles, and so this is what the final one looks like. With a little bit of animation, with a nice old main, it helps communicate the message of what we're trying to get across a little bit better. Okay, trade secret number 5, learn to edit your shapes. And most veterans feel like very, very comfortable with resizing their shapes, with changing the line around it, maybe even changing the stroke of it, and changing the fill. Hopefully there's a couple other things, if not the how you do, what you do with them, that might be helpful to see what we have here. This is a quote that we included in the higher ed presentation. It's simply talking about how when it comes to wages over the past 15 years, the largest growth in wages occurred among people who have graduate degrees as opposed to undergraduate degrees, a point that was important for the president to get across. But I didn't like how I wanted to make some things be more visible here and some things less visible. So here are a couple things that I did. It really doesn't help. It might make it look a little bit prettier, but it really doesn't help readability or understandability, just to change the background and the fonts. So here's what I did. I used shapes to be able to make this happen. I started with a photo, and because I love photos, and I made it full screen on the back. But you can't really have text over a full screen photo. So I used boxes to be able to allow that. I cropped that, I put it in place. The first thing I did was I added a box along the bottom, but instead of just using the normal default colors, I actually changed it to a darker blue. And then I adjusted the transparency to make it a little bit see-through, so you still have the contrast, but it creates the, it allows you to see a little bit more of the photo below. And so that was fairly simple to do. I right-clicked and sent it back so it would be behind the text that I already had. And so that's going to be the placement for my source, which I'm going to minimize. The second thing is I wanted to really set off where I had the quote. And so to do that, up here I added another box, and this box, it again brings up as default blue, but I just changed it to a simple white, so it would be the focal point of the middle of the slide. And so I changed the fill, I changed the line, and then that became the placeholder for my quote. Now, most slides you still have a title on, and the title was important to me, but I didn't want it to be the focal point. So I actually created a much smaller box where we still had the label of what the topic was, but it wasn't the focal point because I wanted people to read the quote first. So I added this, and I didn't do a transparency or solid, but I did a gradient. So these are all of the options that you can do with the fill. And so you can choose 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 colors that you want to blend. I choose colors that are close to each other on the color wheel, so it only looks like a subtle gradient. And then all that I do is I just place the text on the top of it, and I have placeholders for those. And it makes it easy to know exactly what to read first and give some context to what the topic of that slide is going to be. I changed the leading to give the text a little bit of chance to breathe. I increased it a little bit more, and then just placed it in place. And so this one is probably one of my longer demonstrations, and it takes a little bit of time. But once you have kind of the look and the feel, the favorite boxes that you like to use. So if you have created a gradient box and you don't want to go through the trouble of selecting the direction of the gradient, the first color, and the second color, there's things that you can do to streamline that once you know what you want to do. Okay, so this is what the final slide looks like. And as a bonus, what you can do is use the paintbrush to apply all of the styles that you want to as many things as you want in the presentation. So if you double click that twice, you can go to any slide in the presentation, and it applies all of the styles every single time to any object that you would prefer. Okay. Number 6. I put an asterisk on this because I think this is the one that is easiest to learn but hardest to do. And I think if I am going through and I'm doing a 10-minute cleanup of someone's PowerPoint deck, this is the first thing I will go to, is to figure out how can I nudge, adjust, resize, crop to make modular layouts so everything looks like they fit together and you don't leave weird gaps or holes on your slide. One of the slides that we did for our higher ed presentation was simply just an overview of buildings that had happened on campus over the past 5 years. The main message of this was that there's continued growth happening and building happening each of the 5 years. But again, it's a standard bulleted list. And so the first thing I did, like we talked before, is it's simple to try and restructure that simply by applying some smart art. So I did that, and then that takes the larger width of the wide screen, and that's something that you can start with. But there's a little bit more that I think we can do, and there's still a lot of space on the slide that we'd like to be able to fill up. So here's what it looked like. Moved them up here because I wanted to make space for photos. We had photos, or at least conceptual renderings of each of the buildings, and so this is what most people do when they have photos and they want to get them in there. If you're not familiar with resizing, cropping, or making things fit, I think there's a lot of people that think that because they don't know what else to do, they're not sure how to make it fit, it's a puzzle that just doesn't quite fit together, that you'll kind of overlap, think that it's creative montage, and that's okay and fine, but there's lots we can do to make it look better and look more professional. And so this is what I did, and I'm gonna go slow through this. Let's see if it's slow and starting. Okay, first is to resize, and that one thing that I should mention, and I'm gonna pause this for a second. This I probably shouldn't mention in a veteran group since most of you are, but I think one thing that I notice, you either know it and it's second nature or you don't, is whenever you resize, what button do you hold down? Shift. Some people don't, and it makes it really hard and onerous to resize because you feel like you have to eyeball it to keep the same proportions. If you hold shift, you don't have to worry that you're stretching it vertically or stretching it horizontally. So always hold down shift when you're resizing. The next thing to do is, if you want things to be in the same dimensions, crop. And so you can just choose the relevant part of the photo that you want. And all of a sudden, instead of trying to make existing puzzle pieces fit, you make the puzzle pieces fit the space that you want. And so what you'll notice is when you're dragging around, it's kind of light on here, but you see the smart guides, and they will actually snap and kind of hold up a little bit while you're resizing because they want you to help align and make this work well. In 2016, snap does not work while you're cropping, so you still have to eyeball that. And that's something that I find tremendously annoying. But when you're aligning things and resizing things, they will naturally try and align to be the same as other photos. So, and then the other thing that you'll see that I'm doing in here is while you have your crop open, you can drag the photo underneath to just have the pieces of the photo that you want. And that's a great thing if you have a large photo, but you just want to crop in on the relevant portions of it. Do that, especially if you have a large enough photo that you're able to do it without pixelating. And that's something that I think is important. If for whatever reason you don't have your smart guides turned on, 2 other buttons that are useful to know are your align and distribute. And most people should know these, but I'm just going to review quickly. If you have photos scattered over the screen, it's much more efficient to, instead of dragging them one by one, even with the smart guides, to use your align and distribute. The align is the one that's going to line up all the edges. So I'm going to select all of these. If you drag or you select Control A, that will select everything. And then you can go to your align button right here, and we're going to just make all of the tops align with each other. And so that's the button right there. And so now you have them all on the straight point. And instead of trying to move them so they're equally spaced, you distribute them horizontally. And that will make them from end to end be equally spaced so you don't have to worry about doing it yourself. It'll do it fast. Sometimes I've worked with, up to 30 images on a slide if I'm using little icons or something like that. This is hugely useful to be able to work with large amounts of objects, to be able to just select all of them, align them one way, create a group, and then copy and paste and create a grid of any number of objects that you'd want. Okay. One other thing that you can do that may be a little bit more advanced that you may not have done in the past is not only can you crop on your edges, but you can also change shapes of your crops. So this is something I did in this presentation just to add a little bit of interest. And so if you crop to shape, you can choose any of the PowerPoint shapes and it'll superimpose the image over that. Now this hides a lot of it. One thing that every shape and every image crop has is it has that little yellow button. And I think for any time you see a yellow button on any shape or any crop image that you create, I would pull it around and see what it can do, because almost always the default is not going to be the way you want it to look. I think that the time that I'm most interested in seeing this used is especially if you're creating block arrows. It is set, the block arrows are set to a specific dimension, and so if you make it long and wide or tall and narrow, it looks stretched. But you can use the yellow draggy thing to be able to make it so it looks more normal instead of stretched. So that's one thing that I would recommend. So with all of these things together, I've got my 5 photos, and this is the slide that I ended up with. I added a little bit of animation, and this shows the buildings, and we didn't focus on the building names, we focused on the building years to show continued growth at Utah State University. Okay, that's the second group. Are there any questions so far still? Yes?
Is there an easy way to make those all the same shape? You know how when you're resizing the shapes to make them all uniform?
I have tried and I've tried. I haven't Googled it though. But that was something I was specifically doing while I was doing these screen captures because I thought that that was the case. The one thing that you can do is you can, I'll explain it really fast. You can create the shape first, and then in the fill settings will say the fill is a photo, and you can paste the photo in and it will keep the shape and you're just replacing the picture out. So that's the way that I do it when I want them to be exactly the same. Okay, trade secret number 7. So this is where we're talking more about the data that you might be having in your slides. The first thing that I would recommend, and this is not just for graphs, but for any type of charts that you're using in PowerPoint, is to really, really feel comfortable manipulating all the elements that you have in a chart, especially the axes. What you want to consider is what elements will aid in understanding what's on the chart and what can you get rid of to really focus on the things that you want people to pay attention to. So this is a chart of the top 10 most popular undergraduate majors at Utah State University that we were sharing and how many students were enrolled in each last spring. And so this is the default. This is just when I put the numbers in and what popped out. So the first thing that I did is I already had a title, so I deleted that out. You don't need a legend for one bar, so I took that out. For the axis, I wanted the lines to go all the way up to the end. So instead of having a limit of 800, I changed my axis to end at 900. And you can do that with your minimum and with your maximum to be able to show what you want to have on there. Okay, so then what we did here is I didn't want the numbers, but I wanted the values. So I took the numbers of the axis off and I added the values so you could see each individual one. The next thing that you can do with a chart is you can do all of the same things that you can do with a text box or with a shape. So I changed the font, I enlarged the size to make it more readable, I changed the width of the bars to make them larger, and then I added the same gradient color that I've used in my other slides. So it looks like they match. It looks like it belongs as part of this particular presentation. And so I could have used my paintbrush, but I didn't. I just did them manually to be able to add those on there. So this, small changes, but make a big difference in being able to understand the information. There's one more thing that I did. Because this is the top 10 majors, I wanted to have number 1 on top, going down to 10. So I reversed the values of the graph because I wanted people to read mechanical engineering first and not last. I didn't want them to read number 10 first. So that's what I did. I added a couple little bells and whistles, some animation, and this is the slide that we ended up with. So, okay, trade secret number 8. So the next thing is to take that same type of treatment and do that with your tables. This is a simple table of grants received by USU Extension for helping people throughout the state. Already, some things that we did before we got to this point, we deleted a lot of unnecessary information. There were about 3 or 4 more columns of extra things that weren't necessary to the message that we were trying to get across in the presentation. And then also we had individual grants listed, and that wasn't what we wanted to focus on. We wanted to focus on purpose. So we collapsed columns, we collapsed rows to the relevant information that made sense. The next thing that we did is we worked to change the formatting. The first thing to keep in mind is PowerPoint does provide some auto formatting that will help you set off important parts of your table. So if you have a header row, if you have a footer row, you can just say, I have a header row or a footer row, or create banded rows, and it will be able to do that. The other thing that's easy with PowerPoint is dragging your columns and rows and having them auto resize, which other programs may not be as good at. I use InDesign a lot, and it's kind of a bear to be able to make this happen. But you can make things larger. Once you do that, though, there's 2 types of justification that I think are important. One is making sure that your left justification or right justification is the way that you want it. And then also, if you make your row height higher, you're going to notice if something is nudged too high or too low. So changing your vertical justification is something that you don't often get, or that people often don't think to do. The only other thing I did, which has been happening on the screen for quite some time, is I just continued to change the formatting to be able to make it look like it belongs in the presentation. So we can do the same types of things that we do for shapes and that we do for text. Changing the fonts, changing the colors, changing the styles so it makes sense. And so I added, this was the final slide. I added a map to show who we were helping in what counties, and then the table was there. And because we deleted out what we didn't need, we were able to add a little bit extra to provide context of what these grants were actually doing. Okay, so this is one that did not, I had no equations in presentation to the Higher Ed Appropriations Subcommittee. But this is one that I use a lot when I talk to students about their presentations. If you're in the sciences, chances are you're using equations, and chances are you didn't make them in PowerPoint. I don't know a lot about equations, but what I know about design is this can be problematic for a couple reasons. So here is a formula pulled out from someone else's presentation, and the problem is when you import it as an image and you make it larger, it becomes pixelated. Also, if your style has a colored background, it'll just sit on top of it and clearly look like it doesn't belong. You can use your equation maker, and it's actually, I know nothing about equations, but it was very, very easy for me to copy this equation here, which happens to be the Nernst-Einstein equation, which deals with porous materials like cement. But you can just select almost all of the functions that you would need, type it in, and it was not hard at all. I have no idea what this means, but it was not hard for me to create. Once you have that, you can resize it. You can change the color of your background without any problems. You can even change the color of the text. And all of a sudden, that makes it feel like it fits and not like it's some foreign object or artifact that doesn't belong in your presentation. So that's something that's fairly easy that I would recommend doing. It didn't take long at all. Okay, so all of the things that you can do on a PowerPoint presentation are for naught if you come up here and you don't know and you're not comfortable with what you're doing. The first one is kind of a presentation tip, but it's more of a killing a lot of birds with one stone. And that is, there are a couple issues that I hear when I tell people to limit and delete information from their slides. The first one is they worked really, really hard on their slides, and the idea of coming up and deleting everything and having it gone forever, that doesn't sit well with them. The second one is I'll have people say, if the content is not on my slide, how am I going to understand or access that? I'm nervous that if I can't refer to it here, that I'm going to forget it. The third one is, especially for graduate instructors, they will say, my students rely on these slides. This is what they take notes off of. So if I don't have the information that they're going to be tested on up there, if I'm just talking, then what? So lots of this can be solved using your notes and handouts. So when you go to your view section, here's the slide we're going to be working on. There's actually a lot going on here where I took all of the information we deleted, we put it in the notes. And you can use that now in your presentation mode to be able to remember what you're saying. But when it comes to distributing what you're saying, you can go to your handout master, and lots of people, this is the notes master actually, lots of people don't realize that even though you can't format the text in your notes on the slide, you can open it here and you can format everything here. So you can make it look really nice and interesting. So you can change the size of your notes, you can change the bulleting, you can change the amount that it takes up on the page. So all of a sudden when it comes to having something to pass out, you can do that. And then you can change it, what the page looks like on your master, so every single one will look like that. And this comes in handy. So I created a master for this presentation, and you'll notice this looks not at all like where we started. So I made a title for the page, I added the slide number up top instead of the bottom, so you almost wouldn't notice when it's created that this is a PowerPoint notes master, and they just printed out the slides. Lots of people don't use this because they want to create handouts, and you can't, with the notes master, you can't make multiple slides per page. So the workaround for that is to save this as a PDF and then open it up in preview, and then you can print it with multiple slides per page there. So I've created a PDF, so instead of printing, you go save as PDF, you open it in preview, and then when you select print, in your layout section, not there, but the layout section, you can choose how many pages per sheet you'd like to have. So you can print 2 slides per page, which will have the slides as well as the notes. You can print 4 slides per page, whatever makes sense with the amount of information that you're including on there. And then all of a sudden it becomes super efficient to hand it out as lecture notes. So that's something that I would recommend doing for those people who are nervous about getting rid of their content to make more efficient slides. The next thing is take some time to get to know your presenter mode. So that's something that people forget, because when you open it up on your single screen, it automatically opens up to the full screen of your slides. And you forget that you're going to have this screen right here that's going to be able to help you give a better presentation overall. And almost everything on the presentation screen is configurable. So you can make it something that you are comfortable with and is useful for you. Which I would add an aside that as you give, I think that the tendency now for many professional conferences is, if possible, use your own computer to present your presentation. It takes away a lot of variables as far as if you're loading something up on a jump drive, are the fonts going to convert? Are the embedded videos going to play? Is something going to crash? If you can, it should not be that difficult anymore to have an adapter or have your HDMI bring it up and hook this up and present from your own computer. Once you do that, a benefit of that is you can also have your customized presenter mode. So to test that without having a dual screen, here's the slide that we're going to open in presenter mode. And you go to your slideshow, and instead of starting your slideshow from the beginning or the current slide, bring up your presenter mode so you can see what it looks like and what the elements are of that. And so everything on here is movable. One thing that's especially important is the font is sizable. So if you want to view it from here and see what your keywords are, you're able to do that. Also, keep track of your keynotes. Or keystrokes. If you press B, that will black out the slide if you don't want people to be looking at the slides. Or W for white. I'd go black, just so you know. This is neither here nor there, but I just discovered this while I was doing that. You have a pen that you can use as a laser pointer. I don't think it's particularly useful, but it's there, it exists. But there's a lot of features in presenter mode that you're not going to notice in the heat of the moment while you're standing up here while everyone's waiting for you to start your presentation. So a couple things to keep in mind while you're getting ready for what that is going to look like. Okay, the last one is not a PowerPoint tip per se, and that is in the same way that it's useful to control your environment by using your own computer, you might also want to use your own remote. This is our office remote, and we bought it because it was affordable and cheap, and we have a bunch of these for Student Research Symposium. If you're presenting, this is what you'll be using. The problem is it's completely counterintuitive. You think that to advance, you should press up, but you shouldn't. You should press down. So everyone does this, and they're going backwards. And so it takes them 2 or 3 strokes to realize that down is what you need to do to be able to present. So you can buy your own remote and just have it in your backpack for presenting. But one solution that I like is I use an app on my phone. So you can get a lot of different apps that are Bluetooth enabled that speak from your phone to your computer. This one is, it's called Unified Remote. I love it. I think that it's great. The one thing that's nice about this is it's incredibly robust. So not only does it has custom remotes and buttons depending on the app that you are using. So that's anything from presentations, but it also has a keyboard and a mouse that you can use. You can use it for Netflix or QuickTime, and they have specialized remotes that are automatically meant to correlate to the buttons that are in each of those individual apps. It's super useful. And here are the ones that I have installed on my phone right now. You can use Chrome, you can do your Google Music. I use it for PowerPoint, and also they have one for Keynote as well. This is a big of what this looks like right now. This is the basic. So it just has a forward and back. It has go to the beginning, go to the end. If you click go to, it will bring up, you can text entry, so you can jump to any slide number. And you can also go black to white screen without having to be right here and clicking on the keyboard. They also have an advanced PowerPoint, and it's essentially like presenter mode, but on your phone. This is a huge PowerPoint presentation, so it really lags, and I wouldn't use it for something like this. But a simple one, it looks pretty decently. Not only can you do your timings, not only can you see how much time that you've spent presenting, you can set a timer, I believe, to tell your phone when it's time to stop talking. But it also has a it has your notes that you put in there or a slide preview so you can see what's there. I'm not sure why you would need those as much, but it's really robust and there's a lot that you can do with that. So I think that is really, really quick and dirty dozen of things that I find most interesting and useful and help me to be able to make PowerPoints fast and quickly that look pretty decent. What I would recommend doing is we have a website, grits.usu.edu, grts.usu.edu. Right now we have resources up there from past presentations from past years, lots of handouts and indications of other things that I've said in the past about slide and poster design. So we've got a matrix of all of this is what you need for a successful presentation, what's wrong with my slides, how to fix it, a little bit about doing posters, and we've got a lot of examples up there, and we'll also get these slides, the screen captures and videos posted up there as soon as I've taken a nap and had a little bit of time to regroup and get through this. Are there any final questions? Anything I can answer? I can tell you all of the other trade secrets that I didn't put on here that didn't make the cut. So if you want to talk animation or using PowerPoint 2011 versus 2016, using master slides, you can ask questions about that. But otherwise, that's all I had. Okay?